There's always something unsettling about meeting new people, especially when you're invited to their home with little more than pleasantries exchanged on vacation. Speak No Evil, directed by James Watkins and starring James McAvoy, is the latest Hollywood remake of a foreign film. This time, the original 2022 Danish thriller. The movie delves into the anxieties and underlying fears that come with putting trust in strangers, especially when these strangers' intentions might not be as innocent as they seem. The original Danish version, helmed by Christian Taftrup, was a harrowing tale of social niceties gone wrong, escalating to a gut-wrenching finale that left audiences shaken. Watkins' remake doesn't stray far from the source material, but it pulls back on some of the sharper, more disturbing edges of the original, making it less of a psychological horror film and more of a crowd-pleasing thriller. At the heart of Speak No Evil is Ben, a man with a crumbling marriage to Louise. They're seeking to patch things up when they meet another couple, Patty and Sierra, during a vacation in Tuscany. The two couples strike up a conversation, bonding over shared meals and mutual politeness. And before long, Patty and Sierra invite Ben and Louise to their remote farmhouse in the English countryside. Louise and Ben reluctantly accept, bringing their daughter, Agnes, along for the trip. From the outset, something feels off. Watkins plays up the slow-burn tension, relying on the atmosphere of the English countryside to create a sense of isolation and dread. Where the film begins to diverge from the original is in the pacing. The first 30 minutes serve primarily as exposition, establishing the dynamics between the two couples and setting up what will become an increasingly tense relationship. But it's clear from the moment Patty offers Louise a piece of roasted chicken, despite knowing she's a vegetarian, that there's more to this couple than meets the eye. It's a small moment, but it's one that sets the tone for the film's exploration of social power dynamics and manipulation. James McAvoy's portrayal of Patty is a standout performance. His character gradually asserts dominance over Ben and Louise in subtle yet unsettling ways. Small details, like his collection of watches or the way he jokingly pretends to receive oral sex from Sierra at the dinner table, demonstrate how his character constantly plays with the boundaries of social decency. The way McAvoy switches from being charming and funny to threatening is what makes his performance so effective, adding layers to the character that keep the audience on edge. One of the film's most effective scenes showcases Patty's manipulation at its peak. While sitting around the dinner table with Ben and Louise, Patty begins to subtly undermine Ben's masculinity, planting seeds of doubt and insecurity. What begins as a casual conversation about watches morphs into a power play, with Patty establishing himself as the dominant male in the room. It's an almost Hitchcockian moment in its slow-building tension, reminiscent of the kind of psychological warfare that defined classics like Strangers on a Train. Where the film struggles, however, is in its transition from psychological tension to action-driven horror. In Taftrup's original, the build-up to the eventual horror was unbearably slow, making the final act feel like an explosion of violence that was both shocking and inevitable. In Watkins' version, however, the film shifts gears more abruptly, turning into a traditional thriller as the third act approaches. The subtleties of the character dynamics give way to more overt action sequences, which, while entertaining, lose some of the nuance that made the original so effective. For example, there's a moment where Ben, after having his legs broken by Patty, somehow manages to regain enough mobility to continue moving. While this might be forgiven in an action-packed film, it feels out of place here, given the psychological groundwork the movie has laid. Similarly, an unexplained injury to Patty's eye, which appears and disappears inconsistently, detracts from the film's otherwise carefully constructed realism. These inconsistencies could be overlooked in a lesser film, but Speak No Evil aims for something more. It's a film about power, control, and the often unspoken rules of social interaction. The moments where the characters veer into standard horror tropes feel like a missed opportunity to deepen these themes. Without giving too much away, the ending of Watkins' version of Speak No Evil is significantly toned down from the original. In Taftrup's film, the climax was shocking in its brutality and left audiences reeling. It was a bold, uncompromising finale that hammered home the film's message about the dangers of ignoring red flags and placing politeness above self-preservation. Watkins, on the other hand, opts for a more Hollywood-friendly conclusion. It's still intense, and there's no shortage of violence, but it lacks the gut-punch impact of the Danish film. For some, this might make the film more accessible, but for those familiar with the original, it feels like a step back. The sense of hopelessness that defined Taftrup's vision is replaced with something more palatable, and while it's still a satisfying conclusion, it doesn't linger in the mind the way the original did. At its core, Speak No Evil is a film about the horror of social conventions. The idea that we might put ourselves in danger simply because we're too polite to say no is a terrifying one, and it's something the film explores in depth. There's a moment early on when Louise suggests to Ben that they should leave Patty and Sierra's farm, that something isn't quite right. But Ben, ever the people-pleaser, insists they stay a little longer, not wanting to offend their hosts. It's a decision that will ultimately have dire consequences, and it speaks to the film's larger themes about the dangers of ignoring your instincts for the sake of politeness. Watkins does an excellent job of creating a sense of unease that builds slowly over the course of the film. The farmhouse, with its remote location and lack of cell service, feels like a prison, and the tension between the characters is palpable. Even small details, like the way Patty and Sierra's son, Aunt, Dan Hoff, watches Agnes with an unnerving intensity, add to the overall feeling of dread. While the script might not always hit the mark, the performances in Speak No Evil are consistently strong. McAvoy is terrifying as Patty, managing to be both charismatic and deeply unsettling at the same time. His ability to switch between charming host and sadistic manipulator keeps the audience on edge, never quite sure of his true intentions. Scoot McNairy and Mackenzie Davis are equally impressive as Ben and Louise, bringing a sense of realism to their crumbling marriage. Their relationship feels lived in, with all the frustrations and resentments that come with years of being together. McNairy, in particular, does a fantastic job of portraying a man who is trying to hold it all together, even as everything around him begins to unravel. Dan Hoff, as the mute son Aunt, delivers a standout performance as well. His silence adds an extra layer of creepiness to the character, and his interactions with Agnes are some of the film's most unsettling moments. Despite having no dialogue, Hoff manages to convey a lot with just his body language and facial expressions, making him one of the film's most memorable characters. One area where Speak No Evil truly excels is in its cinematography. The film makes excellent use of its rural setting, with sweeping shots of the countryside that are both beautiful and eerie. The farmhouse itself, with its creaky floors and dimly lit rooms, feels like a character in its own right, adding to the overall sense of isolation and unease. There are several moments in the film that are visually striking, particularly during the scenes of base jumping and other extreme sports that Patty and Sierra engage in. These moments, while brief, provide a stark contrast to the otherwise slow, tension-filled pacing of the film. They serve as a reminder that Patty and Sierra live life on the edge, both literally and figuratively, and that their thrill-seeking nature extends beyond just sports. In the end, Speak No Evil is a well-made film that delivers plenty of tension and unease. It's a solid remake that will likely appeal to audiences who are unfamiliar with the original Danish film. However, for those who have seen Taftrup's version, Watkins' take might feel like a watered-down version of what could have been a truly terrifying experience. The performances are strong across the board, and the film is visually stunning, but the decision to soften the ending and lean into more traditional horror tropes ultimately undermines some of the more interesting themes at play. Speak No Evil is still worth watching, especially for fans of slow-burn thrillers, but it's unlikely to leave the same lasting impression as the original.